sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for. When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth. In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck.
Hello, dear listeners of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. Hey, welcome back to another Minisode, where just one of us, one of your hosts, today that being me, Ethan, just shares some quick hitting tips, ideas, skills that we hope will help you improve your management game, your leadership game, and just your ability to build strong relationships at work and in life. And today, folks, we are going to talk about this skill called receiving feedback. And not just receiving feedback, but receiving feedback non-defensively. Now, of course, we've already done an episode on receiving feedback non-defensively, where my co-host Mike and I, spend a lot more time talking about this skill, why it's so important, and really how to do the thing, how to receive feedback non-defensively, how to show up non-defensively when somebody gives you feedback. And today, I'm just going to give you more of a review, a summary of how to do this. Now, as we work on this skill of receiving feedback non-defensively, as we do with any adaptive skill, we need to understand the behaviors to engage in, so we will show up and look non-defensive. And we also need to work on what's going on between our ears, right? Our mindsets, our attitudes towards receiving feedback. And when we can do both of those things at the same time, work on the behaviors and the mindsets, that's where we actually start to change our brain. That neuroplasticity thing happens, and the skill really starts to sink in, and it starts to become, over time, hopefully, second nature. So we're going to do that with receiving feedback non-defensively. We're going to work on the internal aspect of it, right, the mindset aspect of it, and the external behaviors, the things that can be seen or heard by the other person. To take a step back, think about this. What happens when someone works up the courage to give you feedback and you meet them with defensiveness? Well, they're not going to touch that hot stove again, right? When we consistently get defensive in the face of feedback, it's going to do some relational damage. We're not going to be able to hear the truth when it's there. And if we're managing people, we really can't afford to be showing up defensively with feedback, because it closes off that channel of communication that we desperately need. It's going to harm the morale, because it's not going to be safe for your employees to give you feedback. And that's a morale killer. That's a motivation killer. So when we can receive feedback non-defensively, that's how we keep that channel of communication open. That's what allows you to hear the truth. And that's how you build strong teams and strong relationships in life. Obviously, this is an adaptive skill that affects every aspect of our life, with our managers, with our colleagues, with our employees, with our partners, with our kids, with our friends. This skill is so important, and it's always in play. Now, here's the thing. I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine, and her name is Amy G. Dalla, otherwise known as amygdala. Our amygdala. We all have one. And the amygdala's primary role is generally fear, and the triggering of your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn instinct. Now, there are many iterations of fear besides just I'm scared, right? Anxiety is an iteration of fear. Worry is fear. Defensiveness is fear. And we all have an amygdala. And so we all experience fear. And when someone says, hey, I need to give you some important feedback, our amygdala goes off. We experience a fear response right there. They did this study where they took participants and they put them in a kind of a virtual reality simulator. And in this virtual reality simulator, they had them walking down this dark alleyway at night. And as they're walking down this alleyway, they hear footsteps behind them really quickly. Bah, bah, bah. Now, why they're in this VR machine? Their brains are actually set up in a way that they're measuring blood flow to different regions of the brain. And when that happens, the footsteps behind them in the dark alleyway, they see extra blood flow to the amygdala, right? They're actually seeing the fear response in your brain right there. Now, they took these same participants and they took them out of the virtual reality situation and put them in a familiar social setting, and they had somebody come up to them and say, I need to give you some feedback. Ooh. And guess what happened? The exact same thing happened in the brain. Extra blood flow to the amygdala. The thing is, folks, getting defensive, feeling fear when someone needs to give you some critical feedback is normal. It's normal to get defensive, right? And so hear me loud and clear on this. Defensiveness is human. And so the good news, if you get defensive when someone gives you feedback, if you feel defensive, you're human. Welcome to the club. So that's all to say that it's a natural response to get defensive. And so that is why this is a really, really important adaptive skill to work on, because we will fear defensive. So we have to make efforts to changing our behaviors and even changing our mindsets around receiving feedback so we can build strong relationships in work and in life. So you get it. You get why this skill matters. Now let's talk about things you can start doing internally, some mindsets you can work on, some attitudes you can work on to actually change the way you start to feel about receiving feedback. Let me give you 3 suggestions here. So if someone's giving you feedback, the first thing to work on is what we call differentiation. Differentiation is reminding yourself that this feedback is only information. It doesn't have to define me. I don't even ultimately have to keep or own this feedback. And that you get to choose to own the feedback or not. This helps create some safety distance between you and the person that's giving you feedback. If you remember, hey, this is just information. And so you know what? I'm going to receive it like a gift. I'm going to open it, I'm going to consider it, and then I can make the choice to own it or not. So that's differentiation. Get some distance between you and the feedback. Another mindset. How about just curiosity and openness? It's really hard to be defensive when I'm in the mode of just curiosity, right? If I'm in the mode of, I wonder what this feedback is about. I wonder what this person's perspective is. You see, if I only stay with this is just information, I may not hear what I need to hear. Right? You actually have to put the feedback on and wear it and be curious about it. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be insulated from useful information. So I like to think to myself, might this person know something I don't know? What can I learn from this person? I'm going to stay open. I'm going to stay curious. Curiosity and openness, it's almost the opposite of defensiveness. And the third mindset here is self-compassion. It's just remembering to temper your inner critic. It's remembering that, you know what? I have many other wonderful qualities about me. I have growth opportunities like everybody else. Maybe there's a failure here that I'm getting feedback on, and that's okay. We all experience failures. Treat yourself like you would a close friend. Are you going to say to a close friend, "You're so stupid and dumb"? Or are you going to say, "Hey, it's okay. We all have setbacks. We all have failures. And we can learn from this." And by practicing self-compassion, we can actually more easily get into a growth mindset and grow and learn from this experience. So those are 3 internal pieces and, mindsets you can work on, and these will help you see feedback much differently than before. It's differentiation, curiosity and openness, and self-compassion. Of course, I'm not suggesting that this is quick or easy to adopt these mindsets. I mean, this can be a lifelong journey right here, and one that I'm on. But man, the message of openness and non-defensiveness, that's powerful. That's how you become approachable. That's how you build trust and respect. That's how you hear the truth when it's there. I mean, that's how you grow. Now let's talk about the behaviors. Again, those are all mindsets, things that the other person that's giving you feedback can't see you doing. Let's talk about the things that they can hear or see you doing, right? The external piece of receiving feedback, the behavioral piece. The punchline here is we're going to work on acting non-defensive because we're going to feel defensive. This is an adult social skill called self-control. We act non-defensive because, again, you will feel defensive. You can't wait until you feel non-defensive to start being non-defensive. I hope that makes sense. So to act non-defensive, I'm going to do a few things. Imagine this. Someone's got some critical feedback for you. They're giving it to you right now. The first thing you got to do, obviously, is just listen. Like, just practice good active listening skills, like those listening skills we've worked on in other episodes. And listening to them has a few parts. First off, it means shutting your mouth for a second, because this is where defensiveness first starts to kick in, where you start pushing back, interrupting before the other person feels heard. When you start correcting, explaining, it's going to look defensive. So just shut up for a moment, I mean that kindly, and listen. The other part of listening means you actually have to look like you're listening with openness, body language. Now, the person has given you feedback, critical of it, I get it. The next thing you do, ask some questions. And what might you get when you ask more questions about their feedback? One, you get more information, right? In what better way can you show that you're open to feedback than by asking for more feedback? It shows the other person that you care and that you open. These are questions like, hey, let me understand this a little bit more. Is this what you're saying? Can you give me an example of that so I can wrap my head around this? It's those type of questions. Now, of course, you have to watch the tone when you ask questions, because you can still ask questions and sound defensive, right? When did I do that? When did I ever do that? All right, technically that's a question, but it's not in the same zip code as the type of questions I'm talking about here. These are questions designed to say, I want to understand this better. Help me understand. Can you help me understand what you need more of or less of here? Can you give me an example? I want to wrap my head around this. Now, can you be doing these things and still be feeling defensive? Of course. That's why we put on the behaviors. Now, another reason you might want to ask some questions, and this reason is a bit more cynical, but it's to buy yourself some more time. Because as you'll see here in a moment, you have to land on a choice point. You have to figure out what you're going to do with this feedback. And so this just opens up more dialogue for you to figure out where you're going to land. Now, the next thing you're going to do in this conversation is some sort of I get it statement. This is any version of I'm hearing you. Yeah, that makes sense. I get what you're saying. If I understand, this is what you're saying. Now, by the way, an I get it statement is not necessarily I agree with you. You may agree with them, you may not agree with them, but you can still give a statement that says I hear what you're saying and I get it. Now, you're getting this feedback, you listened well, you showed you were open, you weren't interrupting, you had open body language, you asked some questions to understand better, to show that you're open, you gave the I get it statement, right? I understand what you're saying. Now you've landed at a choice point, and you have a few options here. Option 1, agree with some or all of it. If you can find something to agree with, that's a great place to start. Even if you disagree with 90% of what they're saying, but there's that 10% that you can get on board with and agree with, that is a good place to start to keep that relationship strong. Maybe it's saying, you know what, I apologize, I do interrupt a lot. I'll work on that. Yeah, you know what, that probably wasn't the most helpful thing to say in that meeting. If you can find anything, find it. It's a great way to stay connected. And if I can bring you back to some of the internal work, I hope you're practicing being open to the feedback. Now, option number 2, disagree with their feedback. And disagreeing is not the same thing as being defensive, with a couple caveats. If you land on disagreeing, by the way, that's totally fine. You don't have to agree with all the feedback. But if you land here, can you see why it's really important that you did all those other behaviors first? That you listened, asked questions, gave the I get it statement. When you do that and then you disagree, it's more likely that they're going to take your disagreement just as a disagreement if they feel respected and listened to. Now, how do you disagree in a way that doesn't sound defensive? Maybe it's like, hey, we may have to agree to disagree on this one. Or, hey, let me show you the way I look at it. Or, I respect what you're saying, and I see it differently. Now, notice I didn't say, I respect what you're saying, but I see it differently. But is the bad word there. It's one of those psychological tricks, but ruins everything. Right? So just cut out the but. Just do an and, or cut out the conjunction altogether. I hear what you're saying. Period. I see things differently. Now, with disagreeing, there are actually a few things that doesn't make sense to disagree with, that you can't really disagree with. Here's one. One of your employees comes up to you and says, hey, I was really embarrassed in the staff meeting when you called me out in front of everybody. And you say to that employee, oh, you shouldn't have felt embarrassed about that. It's like, oh, really? Tell me what else I shouldn't feel. You don't get to disagree with how someone feels. How someone feels is how they feel. They get to own how they feel. Now you can disagree with your intention. If they're saying, you tried to make me feel embarrassed. Well, okay, no, maybe I didn't try to make you feel embarrassed. But that's different than disagreeing with their feelings of feeling embarrassed. You with me? The other thing you shouldn't really disagree with is the impact you've had on someone. The impact you've had on someone is the impact you've had on them. They get to own that. You don't own the impact you've had on someone. The other person is the expert on the impact you've had on them. You're the expert on your intentions. So again, you can maybe disagree with the intention if they're giving you feedback on what they thought your intention was, but the impact you've had on them is the impact you've had on them. All right. So that's some ways you can disagree without showing up as defensive. Now, your third option here when someone gives you feedback, and this one has saved my butt many times, and that's stay neutral. It's okay to say, you know what, that's really good feedback. I appreciate you bringing that to me. Let me process this for a while, and I'll get back to you. It's just a phrase that says, I'm going to sit with this for a while and consider it. You don't actually have to make a determination right there in the moment. And this is a great option for chronic disagreeers. like myself, if you know that you just tend to disagree with most feedback, use this option so you can think about it, process. Now, every so often, this option doesn't really work, right? Your boss says to you, hey, I want you to start being on time. Let me think about that and get back to you. Okay, so it doesn't always work. But generally, this is a good option to create some time so you can maybe calm down a bit and land on it, whether you agree or disagree with it. So, of course, that implies that you have to make sure you actually follow up with them. So those are your options. Agree with some or all of it. Disagree, stay neutral, and then follow up later. Now, the last behavior here when someone's giving you feedback after you've landed on your choice point, it's just to thank them. Thank you is a reward. And dogs, dolphins, and humans repeat behaviors they're rewarded for. Now, you may not want this behavior repeated on some level, right? You may not love negative feedback, but you absolutely want your employees and your colleagues and those in your personal life to see you as safe to give feedback to. You need to be safe. Now, can I say thank you even if I disagree with the feedback? Of course you can. I mean, what can you be thankful for when someone gives you feedback, even if you disagree with it? How about respecting you enough to give you the feedback? Caring about you enough to give it to you? Trusting you enough? We can always be thankful for feedback, no matter if we agree or disagree with it. So there you go, folks. In review, it's important that we receive feedback non-defensively, to have strong relationships with our employees, with our family members, our friends, our bosses. This is a really important skill for life and for work, to show up non-defensively, even when you're feeling defensive. Some mindsets to work on with this. Differentiation. This feedback is just information. Curiosity and openness. Seeing what might be true from this. And then practicing self-compassion. I have many other wonderful qualities about me, and it's okay if someone doesn't like my behavior. As far as the behaviors, remember, we're going to listen first with openness and non-defensiveness. We're going to ask some questions. We're going to give the I get it statement, any version of I'm hearing you and I understand. And then we're going to land on our choice point, agree, disagree but with grace, or stay neutral and follow up later. And then lastly, thank them. There you have it. Go put it to work this week, folks. By the way, if you like our content on the Manage with Mind and Heart podcast, let me direct you to a few other resources. First, we have a monthly newsletter in which we share management skills, behaviors, things that managers can start to work on to help them improve their relationships and the morale and engagement of their teams. To sign up for that newsletter, you can text the word LEADING, LEADING, to the number 66866. Additionally, go check out our website, nashconsulting.com. You can see our workshops, our leadership development program. We have blog posts on there for managers and leaders, and a bunch of other cool, fun things if you are committed to leadership and management excellence. Thanks for tuning in.